Hey guys, so I am here with another ARC review. If you watched last week's ARC review where I was like, the next one that I have to do is a high fantasy romance and I don't know how that's gonna work and I wasn't sure if I was gonna get it read, well, I got it read. You know, eventually, I did it, I did the thing. It was definitely, I don't think, the world's best paced thing, and that made it especially hard for me to finish it, but that's why we review these things and that's why we talk about it, and that's what we're gonna do today. Surprise! So the book that we are talking about today is The Curse of Saints by Kate Dramis. I think it's Dramis, it may be Dramis, I'm not sure. But this is technically an ARC review, however, the book is actually out already. This is one of a slew of July 11th releases that I got, and you just can't review multiple books with this many books to go before the actual publication date. So if you're interested in this book, you can go out and get it. At the moment, I reviewed an ARC, and I thank the publisher and Edelweiss for letting me have one of those. I always hate doing summaries of high fantasy books because you will not know how many edits I do trying to get just the basic information in to give you a sense of the story. Whew, okay, we'll just try again. So this is the story of Aya. She lives in a kingdom, which is one of many on a continent that worships actually the same gods. However, these different countries worship the gods a little differently. These gods gave certain members of the population special powers. There are different gods that gave different types of people different powers, and Aya has the power to basically persuade people. She can basically think things with her mind, and she can't force you to do something that you don't want to do, but she can use her power to persuade you to kind of go along with what she's asking you to do. Aya is a very powerful Persai, and she is so powerful that she is one of the queen of her particular country's tria, which means that she is basically third in command on this council. The other members are her friend Tova, who is the general. She can also, she's basically an earthbender if you've watched Avatar: The Last Airbender, but she has the power to move and manipulate earth. There are also other people who have the power to manipulate the other elements as well, along with Will, who is known as the Queen's Enforcer. He's the first top level member of the Tria, and he has the power he's a sensori, he can sense emotions. And so he's really good at things like doing interrogations because he knows when people are lying or not. And he can also make people think they're having sensations that they're not. So in terms of torture, he can be very good at that. So Aya, Tova, and Will all trained in the same academy as they grew up. And during that time, Aya and Will basically formed a bitter rivalry. Aya hates Will. She cannot stand him. He represents things such as her mother's death when she was younger. He tried to get her kicked out of this training academy. And so as far as she's concerned, Will has tried to take away everything that has ever mattered to her in her life. He did not cause her mother's death. His father did. It's a long story. We can't get into it all. Basically, there is a prophecy in this country where a second saint will rise. So there was one saint who helped close the veil and keep the gods on one side and the humans protected against these evil magic users. And there is this prophecy that this kind of situation will happen again. A second saint will rise and they will have these mystical, a group of magical powers, more than one power, and they're meant to save the world. The novel's basically inciting action is that it's becoming clear that the time of which this prophecy speaks is coming nearer and nearer. And in the end, in the beginning of the end, if you will, it basically becomes Aya and Will having to work together to try to save their country, save the kingdom, and potentially save the entire world. There are so many other details that I could try to cram into that, but I think I've managed to give you a basic taste of what this book is about. I hope. My immediate issue with this book was the sheer amount of world building. It's one thing, right, to build an entire country, a made-up country, but there is a lot of geopolitics in this one. So you not only have to understand the country, but you have to understand at least 2 of the neighboring countries that are currently almost maybe kind of going to war, and maybe one of them is raising dark magic people. It's fine. But the thing that makes these countries different is how they interpret their magic users based on how they interpret their religion. And so you have to learn the country, you have to learn the different orders of these magic users, and then you have to understand how that magic comes from the gods and the different way that these kingdoms choose to basically interpret what is their version of the Bible. And you're trying to understand all of that so you can make sense of the story as it moves along while you're being introduced to all of the characters that are in the story. And it's just like, I had a really hard time with the beginning. It was so much. And again, I don't know that there's a way that it could have been spread out a little bit more because it all builds into itself. But it just felt very, very heavy in the beginning. I felt a little lost, and it definitely took me, rather than just all of that world building and info dumping up front, I had to like be prepared to be confused and read along and basically learn more from context clues as the story progressed, because there was just so much information, you could not take it in all at once. Once I got settled into the story, I really did begin to enjoy it. Aya obviously is our main character, and she is definitely wants to be morally good, but realizes that she's morally gray. And sometimes her desire to be morally good and the reality of her morally grayness is really just really depressing to her. And she's trying to struggle with, wanting to serve her queen and her gods, and what she thinks the impact of that on her is, which is really interesting. And that's contrasted with how she sees Will. Will does not get any POV chapter, so we basically see him through Aya's eyes. And her initial impression of Will is that he enjoys not just being morally gray, but dark. He enjoys being a torturer. He enjoys, exacting the punishments and revenges of their queen and the attention and the fame that brings to him. And so she doesn't like him for these things in their past, but she also just can't stand the way that he seems to be okay with the things that they're asked to do, and she's not as much. One of the things that makes this book a little bit difficult to follow is that basically half to a third of the book takes place in Aya's country, and then they move to one of those other countries that I was talking about, and that just begets, like, they have to talk about the way that that country interprets the religion and the way that that royal family works and the way that that politics works, and all of these new characters that you get when you go to this other land. And so it was kind of a little bit odd in the pacing, because just when I felt like I hit my stride and I understood this country and these characters, they travel to the other one, and I'm just like, oh God, it's starting again. It was just so much information. So if you like a higher kind of fantasy, maybe you'll enjoy that. But for me, I was like, that just felt very interruptive, and I didn't enjoy that. I don't really want to talk about what happens or the characters that you're introduced to in that other country all that much. I will say that another love interest is introduced. I read the description of this book and it only mentioned Aya and Will, and I was like, okay, so this is like a rivals to lovers, enemies to lovers situation where, Aya has to learn that she's been wrong about Will this whole time. Okay. But then there's like the surprise love triangle also was not my favorite thing. I'm really, really tired of love triangles, especially when it just felt like the book really wasn't trying that hard with it. So that just was kind of frustrating to me. And then the way that this like reveal secret plot like unravels into the ending of the book also just felt very like not particularly well described. I don't want to say not well written, because there's like, technically the book is fine, but the way that it was just like uncovered and revealed just felt really clunky. And that was again really frustrating to me, because there's this big like climax at the end of the book, and I'm sitting there going, I don't understand what just happened. Particularly in the way that it plays out. And again, I don't want to spoil anything, but I'm just saying that I think Aya should have played a larger role in that whole thing. It just came out really weird. At the end of the day, all of the issues that I had with this book were like plot and pacing, right? But I really did enjoy the characters, and I think that there is a really interesting story here, and it certainly ends on a cliffhanger. This is the first book in a series. So if you don't like cliffhangers, you gotta wait till this whole series is out. But I finished it and I thought, well, that was a little clunky and a little frustrating. But now that potentially I have a handle on the world and the religion and the geopolitics, and it's been left on this cliffhanger, and I love the characters, I might be interested in reading the second book. I don't think that I would go out of my way to do or read that book, but I do think that if I saw it, I wouldn't be like, oh no, I don't want to read that. Take what I have said critically with a grain of salt. If you are a person who cares a lot about character, you too may enjoy this despite the other stuff. But if you are a person who can get tripped up really easily on clunky world building and pacing like that, it might be one that you can avoid. So again, I really struggled with reading this one. It felt like it was like written in pieces, but we will see if that kind of clunkiness, once we're out of this like first book where everything has to be explained phase, if the second book can take what was good about it, which is the characters and their stories, and really streamline that into a much more readable book. That's honestly why I'd be interested in reading it. So again, I'm not sure even when the second book is coming out, but if it does come out and I feel like reading it, then I will do a review and we'll reference back to this and see if I was right or if I was wrong. I don't know when that'll be, but I'll see you maybe for that, and hopefully for a smoother review next week. Thanks, guys. Bye.